Every morning, just as the pale Nevada sun broke across the rooftops of Fort Lincoln, a quiet figure appeared near the east gate, always at the same time, always alone. His name, though few knew it was Aaron Mitchell, he was 72, weathered, not just by time, but by something deeper, harder to name. His boots were scuffed, his canvas jacket faded, his broom handle splintered and smooth from years of use. Yet there was something precise about the way he moved, methodical, steady, with the quiet assurance of a man who had once given orders and now gave none. Most of the young soldiers barely noticed him. A few joked about him. One called him Bays. Mascot, another muttered under his breath, probably thinks he's doing something important. To them, he was a harmless oddity, an old man sweeping sidewalks outside the fence line. Not a threat, not a mystery, just irrelevant. But Private First Class Jason Miller noticed him. Jason was quiet, a second-generation soldier who listened more than he spoke. One morning, when the wind was sharp and the sun barely visible, he brought the old man a bottle of water. Another day, it was a hot coffee left silently on a ledge. Mitchell never asked for anything, but he would nod in return, a slow, silent gesture, almost like a salute between ghosts. The man never crossed the yellow line, never entered the base. He simply cleaned sidewalks, gutters, dirt patches beside the fence, left to right, curb to gate. Like clockwork, but Jason saw it the way Mitchell would stop and stand straight when the flag was raised, eyes fixed, shoulders tight. There was reverence in the stance, but something more, memory, he began to watch more closely. And one foggy morning, as Jason paused near the gate, sipping lukewarm coffee, he saw Mitchell standing perfectly still. The broom was in one hand, the other gripped a small, worn photograph. Jason couldn't make out the image, only the frayed edges creased from years of folding and unfolding. Mitchell's eyes were distant, not sad, searching like a man chasing a ghost. Days later, a gust of wind blew open Mitchell's jacket as he bent to pick up a gum wrapper. For a second, Jason saw it, a faded name patch sewn into the lining, a Mitchell, the name scratched. At something buried in Jason's memory, an old training file, a story whispered during orientation, a case study from a long-classified mission, Captain Aaron Mitchell, Special Recon Unit, presumed Kia, Operation Thunderline, 1977. The details were scarce. Mission classified. Body never recovered. No funeral ever held. Just a line in a dusty archive. Gone and forgotten. Jason didn't say anything that day. But that night, he opened his field notebook and scribbled what he remembered. A. Mitchell, Thunderline. Jason mentioned it casually. Hey, that old guy outside the fence, you think he might have served? Corporal Davis snorted, crumbs falling from his protein bar. What? You think he's some secret war hero? Bro, lay off the movies. Sergeant Toller added without looking up. If he was a vet, he'd have benefits, not sweeping sidewalks in the cold. Everyone laughed, everyone moved on. Except Jason. He dug deeper. That night he went to the base. Library, pulling old paper files most soldiers ignored. There, hidden in the back of a training binder, was a reference. Operation Thunderline, Southeast Asia, 1977. Mission compromised, 7 survivors. Commander MIA name redacted. That was it. No photos, no citations, no memorial. But Jason couldn't shake the feeling. Mitchell didn't just stand straight when the flag rose. He stiffened. When jeeps passed, tracked officers with his eyes. He wasn't watching the base. He was waiting for something or someone to see him. The next day began like any other. Fog hovered over the asphalt. The gate stood tall and silent, and as always, just before 0600, Mitchell arrived, broom in hand, satchel over his shoulder, but something was different. A new commander had taken over the base, Colonel David Rohr, younger than most, rigid in posture and policy. One of his first directives, tighten security. No civilians past the yellow line. No exceptions. At 0600 sharp, 2 MPs approached the old man. Sir, one began, trying to sound respectful, we're going to have to ask you to step back from the gate. You're not authorized to be here. Mitchell looked up calm. I've been cleaning this stretch for years. We understand, the second guard replied, but new protocol, no exceptions. You'll have to leave. Mitchell didn't argue. He simply nodded, leaned his broom against the fence, and bent to gather his things, an old jacket, a metal bucket, a small satchel. But as he lifted the satchel, the zipper caught on the bench corner. A metal box tumbled out and hit the concrete with a sharp clack. The lid popped open. Silence. Inside was not trash, not trinkets, but a silver star, dulled with time, a scorched unit patch, special recon, Thunderline, and a photograph. 8 young men standing in front of a burning helicopter, dust, fire, faces, soot-streaked and determined. Frozen in time, one of the MPs, Rodriguez, stepped forward, voice low. "Sir, I have seen that patch before, Thunderline. That mission went sideways in the 70s. Only a few made it back." Jason, who had just arrived at the gate for watch, froze. His clipboard dropped to the pavement. He ran forward. "What did you say?" Rodriguez pointed at the photo. "If this guy's who I think he is, that mission was classified. The commander was never recovered." Jason turned to Aaron, breath caught in his throat. "Sir, were you Thunderline?" Aaron didn't answer immediately. He looked past Jason toward the base. His voice, when it came, was steady. "Not everyone came home, but someone had to stay, to make sure the others did." Jason ran. He didn't wait for orders. Didn't think about the protocol. He sprinted straight to headquarters, nearly knocking over 2 recruits on the way. He burst into the admin office. "Captain Walters," he said breathlessly, "I need to speak with you. Now." She stared at him, startled. "Miller, you'd better have a damn good reason." "I do," he said. "We've been ignoring a living piece of military history." Back at the gate, Aaron Mitchell quietly closed the lid of the metal box, brushed dust from the silver star, and stood. Across the base, phones were already ringing, and in a secure office somewhere miles away. A general's aide picked up the line and said, "Only, sir, you're going to want to see this for yourself." By noon, Fort Lincoln felt different. There were no alarms, no announcements, but something was shifting in electricity in the air, a silence that vibrated with tension and curiosity. Officers who rarely left their offices were spotted through blinds. Radios hummed with broken codes. Rumors drifted like smoke across the base. A hero's outside the gate. Someone from Thunderline, someone we thought was dead, and then the black SUV rolled in. No escort, no ceremony, just quiet authority, matte black, with government plates and windows too dark to see through. It pulled up near the eastern side of the command building and came to a deliberate halt. The passenger door opened and out stepped General Richard Hawthorne. Even in silence he filled the space, tall, square-shouldered, slowed only by a limp that time hadn't stolen, just marked. His uniform was immaculate, his chest heavy with ribbons and medals that spoke of decades of service. His face, however, bore something deeper than rank. Memory. He hadn't warned anyone he was coming, hadn't gone through channels. He didn't have to. He walked past the saluting guards without acknowledging a single one, not out of disrespect, but urgency. His eyes swept across the yard, through the chain link and past the checkpoint, until they landed on a man standing quietly near the east gate, broom in one hand, a box under the other. Aaron Mitchell, the old janitor, turned. Their eyes met. The general froze. For a long, stretching second, neither man moved. Soldiers paused mid-stride. Conversations cut short. Even the wind seemed to hush. General Hawthorne removed his cap slowly, deliberately, and pressed it against his chest. The photograph in Mitchell's hand fluttered slightly in the breeze. The general's voice cracked as he crossed the few remaining feet between them. "Saved my life, Captain," he said, his voice hoarse from years and a weight no metal could carry. "I thought you died with the rest." Tools dropped in the nearby motor pool, phones lowered. A few onlookers stopped walking altogether. One mechanic forgot to close the hood he'd just opened. Nobody knew if they were witnessing a reprimand, a reunion, or a moment that would someday be written into textbooks. Aaron spoke softly. "Not all of us made it, but I couldn't leave until I knew someone remembered." General Hawthorne's eyes welled, but his voice remained steady. "We're presumed Kia Operation Thunderline was classified. Your name," he paused, "your name's carved into the memorial wall. I've saluted it more times than I can count." Jason Miller stood frozen just outside the gathering crowd, pulse hammering. Something sacred was unfolding, and no one dared interrupt. General Hawthorne turned, facing the base and the soldiers beginning to gather. His voice rose not in volume, but in clarity. It cut through the air like a knife through silence. "This man is not a janitor," he said firmly. "He is Captain Aaron Mitchell, Special Recon Unit. Presumed KIA in 1977 during Operation Thunderline." Gasps rolled through the crowd. Whispers followed that "can't be" thought he was dead. "He's been sweeping our sidewalks," General Hawthorne continued, voice hard with truth. "He didn't die. He stayed behind so that the rest of us could live. Every breath I've taken since that day belongs to him." And then he did something unexpected. He stepped back, heels clicked, and offered Captain Mitchell a full military salute. Sharp, deep, absolute. A moment passed, and then another, and like a tide rolling in, soldiers young and old, officers and privates began to raise their hands one by one, saluting not out of duty, but reverence. Mitchell's hand rose too, trembling only slightly. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were full. For the first time in 4 decades, he was no longer invisible. He was a soldier again. What came next unfolded quietly. No press, no trumpet. The 2 men, Hawthorne and Mitchell, sat on a weathered bench near the gate. No podium, no microphones, just 2 old ghosts with unfinished business. The crowd remained still, watching from a respectful distance. It was April 1977. Mitchell began. His voice carried softly, like reading from a letter sent long ago but never opened. "Thunderline wasn't supposed to be what it became. Intel said 6 prisoners, light guard, easy in, easy out. We landed in darkness. Trees like claws. The second our boots hit the ground ambush. They fought through fire, extracted the prisoners. We got to the LZ, but the evac bird took a hit. I held the perimeter while they loaded, gave the signal to lift off. I was the last man on the line. He was hit, fell down a ravine. When I woke up, there was nothing but jungle and silence. He was captured. Held for 2 years in an enemy camp with no name, no tags, no light. I burned my ID during the op. They never knew who I was. Neither did the Army when they finally traded me back. He came home a ghost. They called me John. Doe VA Hospital. Wrong files, no unit to vouch for me. My memory was shattered for months. When it returned too late, everyone I knew was gone. Unit disbanded, no family, no flag to return to. So he didn't barge back in, didn't demand recognition. I didn't want applause, he said. I felt like I'd failed. Some didn't make it. I just wanted to stand watch. Make sure the flag still flew. General Hawthorne turned away to mask his grief. When he finally spoke, it was low but resolute. You didn't fail anyone, Captain. You gave us all a chance to live. Families, futures. I'm here because of you. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't move. They felt the gravity. A man forgotten by paperwork had lived with purpose while the world moved on. That night, Fort Lincoln didn't sleep the same. The Department of Defense moved swiftly. Files were reopened, fingerprints rechecked, handwriting, mission logs, medical records all matched. Captain Aaron Mitchell, once listed among the dead, was officially declared alive and honorably retired. 48 years later, a ceremony was arranged. One like no other. The morning of the ceremony arrived, with stillness. No fireworks, no band, no scripted applause. Just soldiers in uniform, civilians in folding chairs, and rows of American flags fluttering gently in the breeze. News cameras lined the perimeter, their lenses hungry for the moment, but they didn't find their story at the podium, because Aaron Mitchell wasn't there. He stood quietly at the back, away from the spotlight, in the same work boots and weathered jacket he'd worn for years. Not in dress blues, though one had been tailored for him. He watched as officials read off commendations, as citations were handed from gloved hands to crisp folders. One by one, his medals were returned, the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, the Distinguished Service Cross, and with them came what had been taken his name. Removed from the KIA list, reinstated into military records with full honors. Back pay reinstated, VA benefits restored, housing on any base of his choosing, a standing invitation to speak at the National War Museum. When he was finally invited to the podium, the crowd stood. Hundreds of boots struck the concrete in unison, but Mitchell raised a hand gently. No applause, he said softly. Please. He walked with calm steps to the microphone. not as a guest, but as if he were returning to a duty post he had never left. He spoke slowly, clearly, like a man who had had a long time to think and very little need to impress. "I appreciate what's been done here," he said. "But I didn't come back for medals. I didn't stay to be found." He paused, eyes sweeping the sea of faces before him, young soldiers, old commanders, civilians with tear-streaked cheeks. "I just wanted to watch over the flag," he said, "to make sure it never went unraised." Silence settled, not heavy. "Sacred. I don't want a house," he added. "I don't need a title. I've had enough walls around me for one lifetime." He turned slightly, locking eyes with the base commander. "What I'd like," he said, "is permission to raise the flag each morning. Just that, nothing more." For a beat, the air held its breath. Then General Hawthorne stood from the front. "Row, Captain Mitchell," he said with pride in his voice, "you have earned the right to raise any flag on any base in this country." Applause followed, not loud, but reverent. Some wiped their eyes. Others just stood straighter. From that day forward, Aaron Mitchell returned to his quiet post outside the East Gate, but now with a small change. At exactly 0600, the gates opened just for him. He entered with a folded flag under one arm and his broom in the other. The honor guard stood beside him. A bugler from the base band played the anthem. And slowly, soldiers gathered, no longer ignoring him but standing with him. Children began arriving too, at first. Just one boy in pajamas holding his father's hand. Then 3, then 12. They called him Mr. Mitchell or Captain, depending on what their parents had told them. Some wore school uniforms, others brought small flags of their own. They stood silently, watching him raise the stars and stripes with hands over hearts. Mitchell never gave speeches, but when asked by the kids why he did it every day, he would answer with quiet wisdom. Discipline matters most when no one's watching. Duty isn't what you're told to do. It's what you choose to do. Word spread, cadets from Silver Ridge Military Academy made weekend trips just to watch the ceremony. They stood respectfully at a distance, notebooks in hand, studying his posture, his movements, his silence. The Academy partnered with the Department of Defense and created the Aaron Mitchell Ethics Library, a facility dedicated to the human side of service. Letters, journals, lost cases, stories that never made the news. His legacy didn't stop there. Before retirement, General Hawthorne pushed through something called the Mitchell Protocol, a sweeping reform mandating cross-checks on presumed Kia soldiers, secondary ID verification in covert missions, and mandatory psychological evaluations for unidentified returning veterans. It would prevent what happened to Mitchell from ever happening again. The policy was signed quietly in a Pentagon conference room. There was no ceremony, but at the head of the table sat a folded photograph of Captain Mitchell, placed beside a small American flag. Mitchell never sought credit when he learned of the reforms. He simply said, "If it helps one more soldier make it home, that's enough." Over time, things changed at Fort Lincoln. Morning. Flag raisings were added to official base schedules. Unit commanders adjusted duty rosters so more could attend. Local school buses stopped 5 minutes early so children could watch. Officers began citing his name in leadership briefings, not to boast, but to remind. Some heroes serve without spotlight. Aaron Mitchell never wrote a book, never accepted honorary degrees. A living reminder that the heart of military service isn't found in medals, but in unseen sacrifices. In standing alone when no one is watching, on his 80th birthday, Fort Lincoln held a modest gathering under the flagpole. No media, no hype, just the ones who mattered. Children gave him hand-drawn cards. Marines presented a handcrafted cane. Jason Miller, now a sergeant, read a letter signed by every member of the morning watch. To the man who reminded us what service really means, we stand because you stood first. Hawthorne, retired now, sat beside him under the rising sun. Aaron chuckled softly. "I never expected to be remembered," he said. The general smiled, eyes misting. "That was always your blind spot, Captain. You never understood how unforgettable you were." Mitchell passed away 5 years later. No fanfare, no headlines, just a peaceful morning in his sleep. A folded flag by his bedside, a cane leaning gently nearby. But the next morning at 0600 sharp 7, American flags were raised. Simultaneously at 7 military bases across the country, each by a young soldier who had either met Aaron Mitchell or grown up hearing his name. Each flag was later presented to a school, accompanied by a single handwritten note. Heroism isn't about medals, it's about choices no one sees. Signed, simply, a friend of Captain Aaron Mitchell. Even in death, the quiet man with the broom continued to teach. Not through orders, not through accolades, but through presence, through quiet acts that reverberated louder than any marching band. So the next time you see someone forgotten, a janitor, a bus driver, a man sweeping sidewalks alone, pause, look closer, because some of them once stood in front of gunfire for you. Some of them never left their post, even when no one else remembered they were still there. Aaron Mitchell never asked for recognition, never sought applause, but in the end, he became the measure by which all service was judged. Because true honor shows up every morning, broom in hand, flag in heart. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone in your life who quietly made a difference, tell us in the comments. Share it. Honor them.